name's Lindsay, and today is Monday, January 21st. This is episode 19, and I wanted to say a really quick welcome back to all returning viewers, and a warm welcome to anyone who is here for the very first time. This is a mostly knitting podcast, but I talk about a lot of other stuff too, including gardening and other types of making and stuff like that. If you are particular about the types of things that you want to watch, I include timestamps in the description box below, so you can always fast forward through the chatty bits or get straight to the natural dyeing or whatever you want. It has been a very hectic and busy couple of weeks since I spoke to you last. I feel like I have kind of repressed my urge to nest. If you're new here, I am 32 weeks pregnant today. Yeah, I repressed my need to nest all throughout the holiday season. And as soon as January hit, I just became this whirlwind of decluttering and organization. And I've been going through every room in the house and throwing stuff away and donating things and trying to find ways to organize more efficiently. I live in quite a small home, so it's really important to me to maximize the space and get creative with organizing. So, and I've been buying some things that we need for the baby. Luckily, this is our second child, so we have most of what we need already, and I'm just getting a couple of things, but yeah, I've been really busy with that. And it's been great. I still have a lot of stuff to do, but it feels good. I feel like we're getting some stuff done, so that's good. So aside from nesting, I feel like I've been putting a lot of energy into laying the groundwork for all of the goals that I made for 2019. In the last video, I discussed my wardrobe goals, and I will continue to talk about that and probably very specific elements of that as they develop and as I kind of go through the process, and I'll share that with you here. But another one of the goals that I set for myself this year was to eat well. And for me, that mostly means eating garden-based foods, meats that are clean, sourcing some raw milk, and all of that. It's taken me a really long time to kind of figure out what I need to be eating to feel optimal. I feel like in 2018, I kind of finally cracked the code there. So now I kind of want to take my food game to the next level and make sure that I'm not relying on takeout or processed food from the grocery store on the days where I'm feeling lazy. And it's important to me to be making my own food and using up our garden harvest, and even upping our game with harvesting and fermenting and stuff like that. So I've been laying down some systems for that, and I've been researching recipes that I can use for our garden harvest this next season. And I've also been doing a lot of research on freezer meals that I can make in advance for when the baby's born, so I don't have to rely on takeout on the days where we are just too tired and stressed out to make food. I've also been trying to teach myself how to make sourdough bread, which is something that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. Truth be told, I'm probably going to have to take a break from eating carbs for a while after the baby is born, just because eating a low-carb diet helps me rebalance. I have to do it kind of intensively for a few months, and then I can go back to eating sort of a more maintenance type diet. So one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is because I've been considering making videos that are about gardening and that whole garden to table process. I often get requests from people to delve more into that side of things, and I think it would be a lot of fun. It might be unrealistic to think that I will have the capacity to do that this year because the baby is coming in early spring, but I want to. So I guess we'll see. But if I do make videos about gardening, those will be separate, obviously, and they will be labeled differently, and you'll know the difference. So anyone who isn't interested in that sort of thing is welcome just to skip it. I think I've mentioned this before, but I am not the type of person who can just stick to one subject. I have a lot of interests, and I don't like the idea of making separate accounts, like separate YouTube accounts or Instagram accounts or websites for separate topics. It's just not who I am. So any type of video that I make is going to go on this channel. So, but they will be labeled differently, and you will know. And I will continue to make knitting podcasts, I promise. Yeah, aside from that, I've also been cleaning up my digital spaces. I have updated and reorganized my website, and I am planning to go through my emails and to get to inbox 0, which means that everything is organized into files and everything's responded to and everything. And I have to say I'm a little bit stressed out about that because 2018 was really rough on me. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I accomplished a lot and I met my goals for 2018. But it was a rough year in a lot of ways, and when things get rough, I tend to cocoon myself. By the way, if you've sent me an email or a message anytime in basically the last half of 2018 and you didn't get a reply, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it was just a really rough period of time for me, and I once things started to get better, I was sort of out of the habit, and so I am planning to clean up that digital space so I can get back into a system with responding to emails and handling sort of that stuff. So yeah. Anyway, now that I've caught you all up on what's been going on over the last couple of weeks, I am going to share one mostly finished object, one work in progress. I'm going to talk a little bit about natural dyeing, and then at the very end of this episode, I'm going to answer a few questions that I get all the time. So my finished object for this week is the Arnica cardigan by Roland. And this is a knit for the baby. I chose the 6-month size because the baby's due date is in March, and you know, it's been a really warm winter here, and usually that means that we're going to have a pretty hot spring. So I don't want to risk making a cardigan in the newborn size only to have it just completely be useless for the spring, and it'll definitely be useless for the summer because it's really hot here in the summers. But this should fit the baby by the time fall and winter rolls around. The main color of this cardigan is Rama Lamelgarn that was sent to me. I think it's just white or cream, but it's a light worsted yarn, so yeah, I held 2 strands together to make gauge, and I had just enough yarn using 2 skeins to finish this project, so that was lucky. And then the contrast color that's used throughout the cardigan was also sent to me by the same person. It is a hand-spun Falkland Merino, and I was so excited that I had enough of this yarn to finish. So it's a top-down pattern, so I started with the neck, and I knew I would have enough for the yoke, but I wasn't sure that there was going to be enough for the bottom and the sleeves and then the button band. And I was so excited to find out that there was plenty for all of that. So yeah, I'm so pleased with how this turned out. I think it's beautiful, and I think it showcases the colors in the handspun really well, and all the little transitions. I love that the top of the neckline starts off with that kind of pink color and then goes into the blue, and then you get all of the variation throughout the yoke. And here are the sleeves. the button band, the bottom hem. It's a really beautiful yarn, and I feel like this pattern showcased it really well. The pattern was really easy to follow, and it was a very fun and quick knit, and I would highly recommend this pattern. This is one of those patterns where you go to the project page and all of the projects that you see are beautiful. So I felt really good about choosing this to showcase this yarn. Obviously, I still need to add buttons onto this cardigan, but I don't have any simple buttons in my button collection right now, so I'm gonna have to go purchase something, and I want to get something that's just, it's gonna be flat, because I know the baby's gonna be crawling around a lot by the time she can wear this, and so I don't want her to get like too hung up or snagged, because I do have some of the old man wooden buttons that I use for everything, but I think that they would probably get I don't know, hung up on things. So I want to just get some really basic buttons that don't detract from the colors of the Falkland Merino handspun yarn. So yeah, I'm really excited with how this turned out. And I'm excited that I still have some of this handspun left, because I am going to use another one of the yarns that she sent me, which is handspun Norwegian wool, and make some baby booties, baby socks, and probably use this as like accent color. So I want to use every last scrap of this. So in my last video, I mentioned that I wanted to cast on for the Albini Cardigan by Orlan, but I had to wait until I finished my Arnica cardigan first, because both projects for me to get gauge were on the same needle size. So after I finished the Arnica, I cast it on for the Albini. And for this, I am using this organic Gotland 2-ply from Lerka, the Fiber Tales. And I think I also showed this in the last episode. And this is yarn from her family's Gotland sheep. I have to say, it's been a joy to work with this yarn. It's really, really beautiful. And I am loving the fabric that it's making for my Albini cardigan so far. At first I thought it might, after looking at my gauge swatch, I thought it might be a little bit too, I don't know, airy at first, but it didn't really concern me, because I know that this yarn kind of blooms and develops a halo over time, because I've seen it in action on with the rotor sweater that she designed using this yarn. But after knitting up to the point of separating the sleeves, I can say that it's not too airy in the least, and I think it's just going to continue to get better and better. And yeah, I'm really, really enjoying this pattern. Orlan's patterns are all very fun to work on so far. She just recently put out this pattern, and as soon as I saw that on Instagram, I immediately bookmarked it, and I am definitely gonna knit that at some point too. There's really not much to say about it right now. It's going really well. I'm not making any modifications. I'm pretty much just following the pattern to a T for the size that I'm knitting, and it's been a very enjoyable project to knit on, both in terms of the design and the yarn. So in my last episode, I shared some yarn with you that I had first dyed with marigolds and then modified with iron. And it was this glorious green color. And so today I'm gonna go and try to replicate this process. I have a dye pot on my kitchen stove right now that has some marigold dyed yarn. It's kind of a pale yellow, sort of unremarkable. So I'm really hoping to see the same results with this process, but I thought I would take you with me and we can all be surprised about how it turns out. Sometimes magic things happen in the dye pots and sometimes not so magic things happen. So either way, I'm gonna take you along with me right now. So this is the yarn that I just recently dyed in marigolds, and I actually left the plant material in with the yarn this time, which I don't always do, but sometimes if you leave the material in, it'll kind of intensify the shade of the color on your yarn. You can see the color is quite a pale yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer all of this yarn plus all of the remaining dye liquid minus the marigolds into a different pot, because this pot is aluminum and I feel a little bit weird about adding an iron modifier to an aluminum pot for some reason. You know, to be honest, now that I have one skein out, you can't tell with this camera, but this yellow is actually quite a bit more intense than is showing up on the video. Maybe I'll get my other camera out and see if I can capture a more accurate color. Okay, so I have added the yarn to this bigger pot, which is this is the stainless steel pot that I typically use for iron modifying. And I have strained out all the marigolds, and I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more water to the dye bath to cover the yarn, and then I'm going to put it on the stove and heat it up. I find that the iron modification process kind of happens faster when there's heat involved, so I like to wait until the water is at a nice simmer at the very least. Okay, so I've brought the water up to a simmer and I've brought it over to the sink. And I have my jar of iron water, which is, I think I filled it either 1/4 or 1/3 full of white vinegar, and then the rest of the way full of water, and then I've just added rusty nails. And I've had this going for probably a year, so every once in a while when I want to do some iron modifying, I just pour a little bit of this into the pot. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. So hopefully we can capture whatever changes might happen. Sometimes it takes a few minutes before the color fully develops, but yeah. Okay, so it looks to me like the marigold dyed yarn that is being modified with iron is going to be different than last week's result. And so far, it's only been in the dye pot for about 15 minutes. I really don't like to let them sit in iron for very long because I keep reading that iron is pretty harsh on protein fiber. So I'm going to take it out really soon, and the reason I know it's going to be different is because when I dyed that other yarn, it almost looked black. This one, it is significantly lighter, so it'll probably be a light green yellow. I don't know why it's so different. I do know that the yarn that I shared last week was dyed using fresh marigolds, whereas this yarn was dyed using dried marigolds. I didn't weigh any of the plant material, and I wasn't exact with anything because that's just kind of how I roll. But yeah, anyway, I really feel like greens are definitely one of the harder colors to achieve with natural dyes, so I get really excited whenever it happens, and then I try to replicate it. But I guess that just makes the colors even more special when they actually do happen. So that's it for me with natural dyeing this week. Okay, so last but not least, I'm going to answer some questions that I get all the time. I think I'm just going to stick to 5 questions. If I find that there is a need for it, I'll do a follow-up video with more questions answered at a later date. But without further ado, what equipment do I use? Here, I have a Canon 70D, and I use a Sigma 18-35 f1.8 lens. I have a little, it's like a compact sized Rode mic with, what do you call that, a dead cat or a dead kitty or whatever on it, and a tripod. That's my typical filming setup. Though I also have a 50mm f1.8. I think it's a 1.8. I don't think I got the 1.4. And I use that for a lot of my photography because it's a quicker lens than the Sigma. It just snaps photos really quickly, and they're nice and creamy, and yeah, it's great for portraits and I don't know, all kinds of things. I also very much use my iPhone for taking videos and photos. I have the 10XS. I feel like it does a really good job. The sound quality is fine, and the video quality is really good. So that's how I record videos and take photos. As for editing, I use iMovie, which is a free program on my Mac. I may eventually upgrade to Adobe Premiere or something like that, but I haven't seen a need for it yet, though I know at some point I will upgrade, because filming is something that I really enjoy, and I kind of want to take it to the next level at some point. But for now, I'm just using iMovie to edit my videos. As for photos, I do have Adobe Photoshop on my computer, but what I usually end up doing is just transferring everything to my phone and using the Lightroom app. And most of what I do in terms of photo editing is just white balancing. I don't really edit heavily because I like things to kind of look the way that I see them, and I don't tend to use filters all that much, or if I do, it's like very subtle. So yeah, over time I find that that's what I prefer. I am not a professional whatsoever when it comes to videos or photography or editing or any of that. I do have Adobe Photoshop, but I have no formal training and most of what I know is just kind of slapdash, like looking at what other people are doing or just guessing. I think if you are versed in Photoshop and you saw my process, you would laugh. I just kind of do things intuitively, I guess you could say. Though at some point I would like to maybe take some online courses and get better at that kind of thing. Another question that I am often asked is like, what are my tips for starting a podcast? Okay, so I know that you're not going to buy this from someone who has a lot of equipment, but I honestly don't think that you need to have all of this equipment to start a podcast. Some of my favorite podcasts are filmed just using webcam or a phone. Knitting podcasts that are simple and unedited are, in my opinion, quite endearing. So the only reason that I have the equipment that I have is because I've been blogging for a really long time. In fact, I worked as a blog editor for a small company in Portland for a while. And so I got really into, I don't know, the creative process behind taking photos and filming and stuff. And for me, this is like all part of my way of expressing that creativity. Do I think that you need all of this? No, it's expensive. I mean, I didn't even have the top of the line stuff and it was still pretty expensive. So in regards to tips for starting a podcast, I would say the first thing is just use what you have and get started, and use a free editing program. I still use a free editing program. So that's my tip for the sort of technical side of starting a podcast. But what I would say is my number one tip for starting a podcast is more on the sort of mentality behind it. I would sort of have a clear vision of what you want to do and achieve through your podcast before you get started, and maybe even write that down. Just keep it in mind, because I think it's very easy to get swept up or swayed or whatever by pressures that may be. When I first recorded my very first episode, I had a lot of people come in with a lot of ideas of how they thought that I should be doing this. The thing that I think that us podcasters have to kind of keep in mind is that our YouTube channel is our house, and viewers are entitled to their own opinion, and that entitlement kind of stops at the door. And you're not going to please everybody, so you really need to kind of, create in a way that serves you as the creator. And people who don't like what you're doing can find one of the other many podcasts that are out there, because there's lots of them. And honestly, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're probably not going to keep it up. So I would say, have a very clear idea of what it is that you are going for, what you want to achieve, and kind of have that solidified before you get started. So question number 3 is in regards to my hair. Some of you have been asking about my hair and like what I do. First of all, thank you for anyone who said something nice about my hair. I'm a little bit weird about talking about this, but I have naturally curly hair. I do not perm it, and I have really kind of struggled with it my whole life, because not only is it curly, but it's very the texture is just coarse and dry and brittle, because that's just the nature of curly hair, or at least mine. I am currently experimenting with doing something called the curly girl method. There are lots of videos on this on YouTube, so if you're curious, then just search curly girl method and you'll find a wealth of information. The curly girl method is just an entirely different way of managing your hair and caring for it. And I have tried this method 2 times in the past. Both times I was in my 20s, and I only lasted for 3 months tops. But this time I'm giving it an honest try, and I'm experimenting with it for a whole year. So I started back in June. I chopped off a bunch of my hair and I started the process, and I have since chopped it another 2 times because I didn't want to just like go for a big chop. So right now my hair is considered in transition, and supposedly it takes like 2 years for your hair to recover from any damage that has been done. And I can see a huge improvement in my curl pattern. I have to say some days are really frustrating because I just want to tame it into submission with a flat iron or a curling iron, but I haven't touched any heat to my hair. I've been doing really well, and I'm gonna keep at this until at least my next birthday, so at least for 1 full year. And I suspect I'll keep going beyond that because I am noticing that things are changing and it's getting better. It's still not quite where I want it, and I think part of that is just because I really like my hair long and it's a little too short for my comfort right now, but yeah, I recommend giving it a shot if you are someone who has naturally curly or wavy or kinky curly hair. Fourth question, do you ever plan to get sheep or fiber animals? Right now I live in a small house in a crowded neighborhood and I have a very small yard. We have just enough space for a tiny garden and a small flock of backyard chickens. But eventually my husband and I are planning to move out to land near the forest. We actually know exactly where we're going to live. It's going to be out near his family, and we're in absolutely no rush for that to happen. Because we know where we're going, we sort of have the opportunity right now to plan and dream for what we want to do. And one of the things that we've talked about doing very seriously is getting some sheep and some other livestock. That's one of the reasons that I got into natural dyeing in the first place, is because I know that we're going to have access to the forest and I will have all this like raw plant material at my doorstep essentially to work with. So we are kind of preparing ourselves for being in that environment. My husband, for instance, is getting really interested in beekeeping and mushrooming, so he's been doing a lot of research with all of that. And I have been interested in not only natural dyeing, but also using plants as medicine, so I'll probably continue to delve and learn about all of that over the next few years. So yes, it's definitely in the plan to have sheep. Another thing we might consider doing while we're still living in this house is we might get some Angora rabbits. I need to do a lot of research to figure out what would be required, and if it's something that I think that we can pull off. I probably won't do it this year because I think I want to focus on just all the things that I'm currently focusing on and not add another thing to the list. But Angora rabbits are definitely something that we might dabble in. I suspect that if I get Angora rabbits, that I will probably also at the same time need to learn how to spin so I can spin the fiber, which I've been resistant to learning how to spin for a long time because it's just another hobby. And the final question is, what journal do you use? My journal is a Midori Traveler, and I've been using this thing for the last, I think, 3 years or so. And I actually have it in 2 sizes. This is the one that I use for my garden stuff, and this one I use for my daily planning and for my natural dye notes and project notes, etc. And I love these things because they are completely versatile. So you can purchase inserts, like for instance, this one is a bullet. Oh, there, you can kind of see it now. For instance, this insert has the bullets like a bullet journal would, and then this one has a grid like graph paper. And then you can also get blank inserts, and you can see in my garden journal I have an insert that gives you like a calendar template. Yeah, I just find these things super useful. I love them. I use the heck out of both of them, and I like that they're fully customizable and I don't have to just kind of adhere to whatever template someone else kind of put in place for me. So they are the Midori Traveler notebooks. I got them off Amazon. I know that there are lots of different kinds of Traveler notebooks like the Midori, but I really like my Midori. So that's what I use for journaling. Okay, that's it for this episode. Thank you for watching. If you want to connect with me on social media, I am at A Wooden Nest on Instagram. That's probably where I'm most active. Or I'm also A Wooden Nest everywhere else. Twitter, Facebook, Ravelry. And my website is at www.awoodennest.com. I will see you guys in a couple weeks for my next video. Also, real quick, I wanted to mention my next shop update is going to be February 2nd. So I will try to send out a newsletter and post about it on social media. And I'm telling you right here, February 2nd. Mark your calendars. Okay, bye.